Fantasy games and secret clubs played a big part in your childhood games. Tell us a little about that, and also about the TT Club.
Oh, yes. Well, the TT Club, of course, was a secret society that seemed, in retrospect, to have no further purpose than the formulation and progressive amendment of its own bylaws. We made a secret of the meaning of the name, of course, but now it can be told it was the Twisted Thread. That was TTT, and it seems that at one point I even established a club newspaper. And I have it here, TTT Club News.
And that's dated November 1920.
1920.
So you were 12 years of age when you edited that newspaper.
Quite so, yes.
And that wasn't the only club, was it? We had something a little later with Arthron, did we not?
Oh, yes. Well, Arthron, yes. We hadn't thought of that as a club, but it does come to the same thing. That was at Oberlin College. Oberlin forbids and forbade fraternities. This filled in, as it worked out, something of that function. It was the house, the rooming house, that we happened to converge on, and we were a very congenial group. We changed the name of the house. The Hawk Shop, it had been called. It didn't seem to be particularly expressive. We changed the name to The Joint, but rendered it in Greek. And one of the group made the sign, which adorned that house then for some 4 years at least, perhaps sometime beyond.
And
Arthron.
That's what you refer to as the sacred relic.
Sacred relic, quite so.
The old arthrites.
Quite so, and I've been the custodian.
Right. Your father ended his formal education with high school and took correspondence courses afterwards and worked very hard on his business. Tell us a little about him.
He was a shy man, but very, very kind. And quite resourceful. My communication, my contacts were more abundant with my mother, who was very encouraging. In fact, I thought rather excessively encouraging.
Mother attended college and described herself or thought of herself as being deeply religious as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what she liked, what she disliked?
Yes, she went to Buchtel College, as it was called then, in Akron, for just 2 or 3 years. She never graduated. She dropped out. I think there was a money problem, and became a school teacher, and taught in Akron public schools for quite some years.
And tell us a little bit about the 19th century atlas. You mentioned this in your autobiography, and it's to play a later role, as we'll discover, with your fascination for travel and cartography.
Yes, it was I wish I had it still. Don't know what became of it, but it was a school book, a geography textbook that my mother had back in the 19th century when she was in school. And somehow it came into my hands, and as a very small child, I was sprawled there on the carpet, poring over these maps, fascinated, tracing out various routes, one place or another, no purpose that I can identify.
Do you think that your parents' difference in education led to any sort of conflicts at home between them or among?
No, I wasn't aware of any conflict. My mother was she was more of a reader than my father. My father's reading was apt to be very practical things. His correspondence course had been in law. He was organizing his business. And he was also interested in local history. They seem to be certainly, I always felt, very much on a par from the point of view of education. After all, she hadn't graduated from college.
Mm-hmm. Many people say that they develop very different relationships with their parents. Would you say that that was the case with you?
Oh, yes, very much so, very much so. I was much closer to my mother, who, as I remarked, was very encouraging and took an interest in my my childish projects.
Your mother had a sister, I beg your pardon, your mother had a brother, Willard, after whom you were named.
Yes.
Was his achievement in any way something that you looked up to, or?
Yes, I think that's quite significant as I think back on it. She very much admired her brother, whom I never met. In my earliest youth, he had moved to Colorado. But he was a mathematician. He taught mathematics at what has now become Akron University. Well, I expect that was a factor in my becoming, or taking kindly anyway, to mathematics, which came to be my field of concentration in college. Then at another point, I remember her mentioning Edgar Allan Poe in connection with her brother, and rather somehow shuddering at the thought of these horror stories. That made me interested in Poe, and I guess it seemed rather manly to be interested in Poe in view of that shudder. I read all of Poe. And Poe, with his really overdrawn elaborateness and formality of style, influenced me for a while there, and I was, when I was fancying a possible literary career in my, I don't know, early high school days perhaps, writing some outrageously bad piece in a style that was modeled after Poe as best I could. And Poe's poems, some of them became, some of them I still admire very much.
As a youngster, did you prefer outdoor pursuits, or did you prefer reading and indoor pastimes? I mean, did you enjoy sport, for example?
Sports moderately. My reading wasn't anywhere as voluminous as my brother. My brother was a great reader. I didn't read very much. I had this elaborate imaginary sort of narrative of my own that I was carrying on, and with the help of my the neighbor children, I would enlist one or another in one or another of the parts in this imaginary life, and then consulting reference books and drawing up lists, often geographical or historical lists, or drawing maps of my imaginary towns. These were my activities.